Imagine standing in the parking lot of your daughter's graduation, watching your husband walk in with her. The woman everyone whispers about. The betrayal stings, but what happens next? Today's story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming dignity, unexpected alliances, and the moment a woman decides her worth. Buckle up, this one's personal. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and smash that like button. Stories like this thrive because of you. And don't forget the bell. You won't want to miss what comes next. The invitation. The morning of Emma Mitchell's high school graduation dawned bright and cloudless, the kind of day that felt like a promise. Laura Mitchell stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the emerald green dress she had bought just for this occasion. It was the same shade as Emma's eyes, a silent tribute to the daughter who had somehow, impossibly, grown up overnight. She smoothed the fabric over her hips, her fingers lingering on the slight wrinkles near the seams. She had lost weight over the past year. Stress, probably. Or maybe it was the way Daniel had started coming home later, his phone always face down on the table, his smiles a little too quick. Her own phone buzzed on the dresser. A text from Emma. Laura's lips curved into a smile as she reached for it, until she saw the photo. There they were. Daniel, in his navy blue suit, the one she had picked out for him last week, his arm draped casually around Vanessa Cole's shoulders. Vanessa, his 29-year-old executive assistant, in a sleek red dress that clung to her like a second skin. The two of them stood in front of Lincoln Park High School's entrance, grinning like they had just won something. The caption read, *, Dad's +1 surprised me too. Guess we're a party of 3? *. Laura's breath caught. She read the words again, then a third time, as if they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. But they didn't. She had known, of course. There had been whispers at the company holiday party, the way Vanessa laughed a little too loudly at Daniel's jokes, the way his hand lingered on her lower back a second too long. Laura had told herself she was imagining things. That Daniel wouldn't. Not after 20 years. But here it was undeniable. Her fingers trembled as she typed back. I'll be there soon.
She didn't know what else to say.
The drive to the school passed in a blur of stoplights and honking cars. Laura's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, her mind racing. Should she confront him? Pretend she hadn't seen the photo? Walk in there like nothing was wrong? The parking lot was packed when she arrived. Families in their Sunday best streamed toward the auditorium, laughing and taking photos. Laura sat in her car for a long moment, watching them through the windshield. She could see Emma near the entrance, her dark curls bouncing as she talked animatedly to a friend. Daniel and Vanessa were nowhere in sight, probably already inside, saving seats. Laura took a deep breath. She could do this. For Emma. She was halfway to the auditorium doors when she saw him. James Carter, Daniel's former CFO, standing near a bench with a program in his hands. He looked different than the last time she'd seen him. Leaner, his dark hair slightly longer, his sharp jaw shadowed with stubble. But there was no mistaking him. The scandal had been ugly. James had uncovered financial discrepancies in the company's books, irregularities that pointed to someone high up. Daniel had fired him before the investigation could go any further, calling it a personality conflict. Laura had never asked for details. Now, James's gaze locked onto hers, and for a second, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, he tilted his head, as if he'd been waiting for her. Laura hesitated. She barely knew James, just polite nods at corporate events, the occasional exchanged pleasantries. But the way he looked at her now wasn't polite. It was knowing. He took a step forward. Laura Mitchell, he said, his voice low. You look like you could use an ally. She should have walked away. But something in his expression, the quiet anger, the unspoken understanding, made her pause. Why are you here? She asked. James glanced toward the auditorium, then back at her. Same reason as you. To watch a kid I care about graduate.
A beat.
And maybe to see the look on Daniel's face when he realizes he's not untouchable. Laura's pulse jumped. James held out his arm. What do you say? Let's give them something to talk about. For the first time that day, Laura smiled. She took his arm. and together they walked inside. The unlikely ally. The moment Laura's fingers touched James's arm, a current of defiance surged through her. The murmurs began immediately, soft at first, then growing louder as they moved through the crowded lobby. Heads turned. Eyes widened. Someone dropped a program. James leaned in slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't look at them. Look at me." Laura forced her gaze upward, meeting his steady, dark eyes. There was no pity there, only a quiet understanding that made her stand taller. "Better," he said, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "Now, let's find our seats before Daniel has a coronary." The auditorium was packed, rows of folding chairs filled with proud families. Laura scanned the crowd, her stomach tightening when she spotted Daniel near the front. He was turned halfway around in his seat, his face frozen in shock. Vanessa, perched beside him, looked like she'd been slapped. Emma stood near the stage, her valedictorian medal glinting under the lights. When she saw Laura and James, her eyebrows shot up. For a terrifying second, Laura feared her daughter would be angry, but then Emma's lips curved into a small, secret smile before she turned back to her friends. James guided Laura to two empty seats near the middle aisle, directly in Daniel's line of sight. As they sat, Laura's hands trembled in her lap. "You okay?" James asked. Laura swallowed. "I don't know what I'm doing." "Yes, you do." He kept his eyes forward as the principal stepped up to the podium. "You're showing your daughter that no one gets to disrespect you. Not even her father." A flash of memory hit Laura, 6 months earlier, the night James had been fired. She'd been in the kitchen when Daniel stormed in, his face flushed with rage. "That bastard thinks he can accuse me?" he'd snarled, pouring himself a drink. Laura had stayed silent, stirring pasta sauce like the good wife she was supposed to be. Now she turned to James. "Why did he really fire you?" James's jaw tightened. The principal's voice droned on about academic excellence, but neither of them heard it. "Because I found proof Vanessa was skimming from client accounts," he said quietly. "And when I took it to Daniel, he gave me a choice: walk away quietly, or he destroy my reputation." Laura's breath caught. "You should have fought." "I did." James met her gaze. "But without backup, it was my word against theirs. And we both know how that goes." The crowd erupted in applause as the first row of graduates stood. Laura clapped mechanically, her mind racing. All those late nights Daniel claimed were business meetings. The unexplained withdrawals from their joint account. The way Vanessa had started appearing at family dinners, laughing too loudly at all his jokes. It hadn't just been an affair. It had been a conspiracy. A sharp elbow jabbed her ribs. "Incoming," James muttered. Vanessa was pushing her way down the aisle, her red dress like a wound against the sea of pastel graduation colors. She stopped in front of them, her perfume cloying. "Laura," she purred. "What a surprising choice of escort." Before Laura could respond, James crossed his ankles casually.
"Vanessa."
"Still wearing last season's Prada, I see." Vanessa's smile faltered. Laura stood, her voice steady for the first time all day. "Is there something you needed?" The music swelled as the graduates began filing toward the stage. Vanessa glanced toward Daniel, who was watching them like a hawk, then back at Laura. "This isn't over," she hissed. James rose to his full height, towering over her. "No," he agreed. "It's just beginning." As Vanessa stalked off, Laura exhaled shakily. The room seemed to tilt around her. James's hand found the small of her back, warm and solid. "Breathe," he murmured. "Emma's about to speak." And there she was, their daughter, their brilliant, brave girl, stepping up to the microphone with her speech in hand. Laura's vision blurred with tears as Emma's voice rang out clear and strong. "They say it takes a village to raise a child. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes the bravest thing a village can do is stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." Emma's eyes found Laura's in the crowd. "Especially when it's hard." In that moment, Laura knew two things with absolute certainty. Emma had seen everything, and she was proud of her mother. James's fingers brushed against hers. A silent "I'm here." Laura didn't pull away. Somewhere in the front row, Daniel was seething. And for the first time in years, Laura didn't care. The walk-in. The applause for Emma's speech thundered through the auditorium, but Laura barely heard it. Her entire world had narrowed to two things: the warmth of James's hand against hers and the burning weight of Daniel's glare from across the room. Vanessa had returned to her seat beside him, her spine rigid with barely contained fury. She whispered something in Daniel's ear, her manicured nails digging into his arm. Laura could practically see the storm brewing behind his carefully composed expression. Emma stepped down from the stage, her valedictorian medal gleaming under the lights. As she made her way back to her seat, she caught Laura's eye and gave her the smallest, most imperceptible nod, just enough to let her know she understood. James leaned in, his breath warm against Laura's ear. "You're shaking." She hadn't even realized. Her hands trembled in her lap, her pulse hammering so loudly she was sure everyone around them could hear it. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted quietly. James's fingers brushed against hers again, grounding her. "You already are." The ceremony dragged on: awards, diplomas, more speeches. Laura barely registered any of it. Her mind raced with questions. How long had Daniel and Vanessa been lying to her? How much of their life together had been a carefully constructed illusion? And why had James, of all people, been the one to stand beside her today? When the final notes of the school anthem faded and the graduates threw their caps into the air, the crowd erupted into cheers. Families surged toward their children, cameras flashing, voices overlapping in excitement. Laura stood, her legs unsteady. "I need to find Emma." James rose beside her. "Then let's go." They moved through the crowd, Laura acutely aware of the whispers that followed them. "Isn't that Daniel Mitchell's wife?" "Who's the guy with her?" "Did you see the look on his face?" Then, a voice cut through the noise, sharp and saccharine. "Laura, there you are." Vanessa materialized in front of them, a champagne flute in hand. The liquid sloshed precariously close to the rim as she stepped into Laura's path. "We were so worried when you didn't show up on time. Daniel said you must have gotten held up." Laura forced a smile. "I'm here now." Vanessa's gaze flicked to James, her lips curling. "And with such interesting company." Before Laura could respond, Emma appeared at her side, her graduation cap slightly askew.
"Mom."
"There you." She stopped short when she saw Vanessa, her smile fading. Vanessa reached out to adjust Emma's cap, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Congratulations, sweetheart. Your speech was inspiring." Emma recoiled slightly, her eyes darting to Laura. James cleared his throat. "Emma, your mother and I were just talking about how proud we are of you." Vanessa's grip tightened around her glass. "How touching." Then, as if in slow motion, her arm jerked, just slightly, and the champagne spilled down the front of Laura's emerald green dress. The crowd around them gasped. Vanessa's eyes widened in mock horror. "Oh my God, Laura, I'm so sorry. It was an accident, I swear." Laura looked down at the dark stains spreading across the fabric. The dress she had bought just for today. The dress that matched Emma's eyes. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then James shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over Laura's shoulders without a word. The gesture was simple, protective, a silent declaration of whose side he was on. Emma's jaw clenched. "Mom." Daniel pushed through the crowd, his face thunderous. "What the hell is going on here?" Laura met his gaze, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Just a little accident. Nothing to worry about." Vanessa fluttered her lashes at Daniel. "I didn't see her there, I swear. I feel terrible." Emma crossed her arms. "Yeah, you look devastated." Daniel's eyes darted between Laura and James, his nostrils flaring.
"Laura."
"A word. Alone." James stepped back, giving her space, but Laura didn't move. "Whatever you have to say to me," she said quietly, "you can say it in front of them." Daniel's face darkened.
"Fine."
"You want to humiliate me in public? Is that what this is?" "No, Daniel," Laura said. "You did that all by yourself." The air between them crackled with tension. Then Emma grabbed Laura's hand. "Come on, Mom. Let's go take pictures. She pulled Laura away, James falling into step beside them. Behind them, Daniel and Vanessa stood frozen, their perfect facade crumbling in real time. As they stepped into the sunlight, Laura tightened James's jacket around her shoulders. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time in years, she wasn't fighting alone. The speech that wasn't. The afternoon sun beat down on the school courtyard as families clustered together for photos, their laughter ringing across the manicured lawn. Laura stood stiffly beside Emma, forcing a smile as camera flashes popped around them. James lingered a few steps back, giving them space while still maintaining a protective presence. Emma squeezed Laura's hand. You okay? Laura adjusted James's jacket around her shoulders, covering the champagne stain. I will be. A shadow crossed Emma's face. Dad and Vanessa are coming this way. Laura's spine straightened. She could see them approaching from the corner of her eye, Daniel's stride purposeful, Vanessa clinging to his arm like she'd staked her claim. Laura, Daniel said as they reached them, his voice tight. We need to talk about what happened in there. James took a subtle step forward, but Laura shook her head slightly. This was her battle. What's there to talk about, Daniel? Laura kept her voice calm. You brought your mistress to our daughter's graduation. The math seems pretty simple. Vanessa's grip on Daniel's arm tightened. That's a disgusting accusation. It's not an accusation, Emma cut in, her voice shaking with barely contained fury. It's a fact. Did you really think I would notice? That mom wouldn't. Daniel's face flushed. Emma, this isn't the place. Then where's the place, Dad? Emma's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby families. When were you planning to tell us? Or were you just going to keep lying? A muscle twitched in Daniel's jaw. Laura recognized the sign. He was about to lose his temper. Before he could speak, the principal's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. Attention, graduates and families. Please make your way to the auditorium for the special alumni recognition ceremony. Valedictorian Emma Mitchell will be giving a second speech in 5 minutes. Emma paled.
What?
I didn't prepare anything else. Daniel seized the opportunity to regain control. We'll discuss this later. Right now, Emma needs to. I'll help her. Laura stepped between Daniel and their daughter. You and Vanessa can find seats. The dismissal was clear. Daniel's eyes narrowed, but with an audience forming around them, he had no choice. He stalked off, Vanessa shooting one last venomous look over her shoulder. As soon as they were out of earshot, Emma sagged against Laura. Mom, I can't do another speech. Not after all this. James cleared his throat. If I may, the alumni ceremony is usually more informal. You could speak from the heart. Laura studied him. You know about this tradition? I graduated from Lincoln Park too. Class of '99. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Back then, the valedictorian would share what they really learned in high school. Not the polished version. Emma's eyes lit up. So I could. Say what you need to say, Laura finished, squeezing her daughter's hand. No filters. They hurried back to the auditorium, the crowd already reassembling. As Emma ducked backstage to prepare, Laura turned to James. Why are you really here today? James met her gaze unflinchingly. Because 6 months ago, when Daniel fired me for doing the right thing, you were the only one who looked ashamed. Laura's breath caught. She remembered that day. The way James had stood in their foyer, his box of office belongings in hand, while Daniel made thinly veiled threats. She'd wanted to say something, do something, but fear had paralyzed her. The lights dimmed, signaling the start of the ceremony. They found seats just as the principal took the microphone. And now, our valedictorian with some parting words for her classmates, Emma Mitchell. Emma walked to the podium, her notes clutched in shaking hands. The spotlight made her look impossibly young and brave all at once. She took a deep breath. My prepared speech was about achievement, she began, then crumpled the paper in her hands. But what I really learned these past 4 years is that some lessons don't come from textbooks. A hush fell over the crowd. I learned that silence can be just as loud as shouting, Emma continued, her voice gaining strength. That sometimes the people who claim to love you will look you in the eye and lie. And I learned that courage. Her eyes found Laura's in the crowd. Courage looks like walking into a room with your head held high, even when your heart is breaking. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Vanessa stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched. Emma lifted her chin. So my advice is this: surround yourself with people who stand by you when it's hard, not just when it's easy. The applause was deafening. Students leapt to their feet. Through the roaring crowd, Laura saw Daniel sitting perfectly still, his face a mask of stunned betrayal. James leaned close, his whisper warm against Laura's ear. She's remarkable. Laura watched her daughter take a bow, tears streaming down her face. She is. As Emma left the stage, Laura knew one thing with absolute certainty: nothing would ever be the same again. And for the first time, that didn't scare her. The reckoning. The standing ovation for Emma's speech seemed to last forever. Laura clapped until her hands stung, tears blurring her vision as she watched her daughter, her brave, brilliant daughter, walk off stage with her shoulders squared and head held high. James leaned in, his voice barely audible over the applause. We should meet her backstage. Laura nodded, but as they rose from their seats, Daniel cut through the crowd toward them, his face dark with fury. He grabbed Laura's arm, his fingers digging in painfully. What the hell was that? He hissed. James moved instantly, inserting himself between them. Let her go.
Now.
Daniel released Laura, but didn't back down. This is between me and my wife. Ex-wife, Laura corrected, rubbing her arm. Or haven't you gotten around to filing the paperwork yet? The crowd around them had begun to notice the confrontation. Whispers spread like wildfire. Daniel's jaw clenched as he realized they had an audience. Emma appeared at Laura's side, her face pale. Dad, stop. Daniel's expression twisted. You humiliated me up there. No, Emma said, her voice shaking but clear. You humiliated yourself when you brought her to my graduation. Vanessa chose that moment to slither up beside Daniel, her red dress like a warning flag. Emma, sweetheart, you're upset. Don't call me that. Emma's voice cracked like a whip. You don't get to pretend you care about me. The auditorium lights flickered, signaling the official end of the ceremony. Families began filing out, but not without casting curious glances at the unfolding drama. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his composure slipping. Let's go home and discuss this like adults. Laura laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. There is no home to go back to, Daniel. Not after this. James touched her elbow. Laura. She shook him off.
No. This needed to be said.
You brought your mistress to our daughter's graduation, Laura continued, her voice rising. You let her sabotage Emma's moment. And now you want to talk. Daniel's face flushed crimson. You're making a scene? Good. Laura stepped forward until they were nose to nose. Because I'm done being invisible. Done pretending not to see what's right in front of me. Vanessa smirked. This is pathetic. Daniel, let's go. James moved so quickly it made Laura blink. He was in Vanessa's space in an instant, his voice low and dangerous. One more word, and I'll release the embezzlement files to the board tomorrow instead of next week. Vanessa's smirk vanished. Daniel's head whipped toward James. You bastard. Emma stepped between them, her hands raised. Stop. Just stop. She turned to Laura, her eyes pleading. Mom, can we please go? The fight drained out of Laura all at once. She reached for Emma's hand. Of course, baby. As they turned to leave, Daniel called after them. Laura, we're not done here. James fell into step beside them, a solid, reassuring presence. Yes, he said without looking back. You are. The walk through the emptying auditorium felt surreal. Laura kept waiting to wake up, to find herself back in her bedroom, staring at her reflection as she prepared for a normal graduation ceremony. But this was real. Emma's grip on her hand tightened. Mom, what happens now? Laura looked at her daughter, really looked at her. The smudged mascara, the trembling lips, the way she held herself together despite everything. Now, Laura said softly. We go somewhere quiet, and we figure out what comes next. James cleared his throat. My car's up front. I can drive you wherever you need to go. Laura met his gaze. Saw no pity there, just quiet strength. The same strength that had made him stand up to Daniel when no one else would. Thank you, she said. And for the first time in years, she meant it with her whole heart. As they stepped out into the golden afternoon light, Laura inhaled deeply. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and new beginnings. Behind them, the doors to the auditorium slammed shut with finality. There was no going back. And for once, that was exactly what Laura wanted. The breaking point. The leather seats of James's Mercedes enveloped Laura like an embrace as they pulled away from the school. Emma sat silently in the back, staring out the window with red-rimmed eyes. The weight of the day pressed down on all of them, thick and suffocating. James kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles pale against the steering wheel. Where to? Laura hesitated. Her first instinct was home, but the house on Elm Street didn't feel like home anymore. Not with Daniel's ghost in every room. The Windsor Hotel, she said finally. Just for tonight. Emma's head snapped up. We're not going back. Laura turned in her seat to face her daughter. Do you want to? The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Emma's lower lip trembled before she pressed them into a thin line and shook her head. James's phone buzzed in the console. Laura caught a glimpse of the screen. Daniel Mitchell calling, before James rejected the call with a swipe of his thumb. He's panicking, James murmured. Laura studied his profile, the sharp angle of his jaw, the faint scar above his eyebrow she'd never noticed before. What did you mean back there? About releasing files to the board. James exhaled through his nose. Exactly what I said. I have proof Vanessa's been funneling company funds into offshore accounts. Daniel's been covering for her. Emma leaned forward, gripping the headrest of Laura's seat. Is Dad in trouble? The question hung in the air. Laura watched the play of emotions across James's face, the tightening around his eyes, the slight downturn of his mouth. Yes, he said at last. But he made his choices. The hotel loomed ahead, its marble facade gleaming in the late afternoon sun. James pulled under the porte-cochere and killed the engine. For a moment, no one moved. Then Emma unbuckled her seatbelt with a sharp click. I need to pee. The abrupt normalcy of the statement almost made Laura laugh. Almost. James handed Laura a keycard as the valet opened Emma's door. Penthouse suite. Under my name. Laura's fingers brushed his as she took it. You planned this. I hoped. His dark eyes held hers. I know what it's like to need an escape hatch. The suite took Laura's breath away, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a living area with plush sofas, a bedroom with a king-sized bed already turned down. Emma disappeared into the bathroom without a word. Laura moved to the window, staring at the skyline without really seeing it. How bad is it going to get? James came to stand beside her, close but not touching. For Daniel? Bad. The board won't tolerate embezzlement, especially not when it's tied to. He trailed off. To his mistress. Laura finished flatly. How long has it been going on? At least a year.
A year.
12 months of lies. 365 days of pretending. Laura's knees buckled. James caught her elbow, steadying her. His touch was warm, solid, real. I'm sorry, he murmured. Laura turned her face into his shoulder, breathing in the scent of his cologne, spice and something indefinably James. She didn't cry. She was done crying over Daniel. The bathroom door opened and Emma emerged, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She took in the scene, her mother in James's arms, and something like understanding flickered in her eyes. I'm ordering room service, she announced, grabbing the menu. And we're watching trashy movies until we pass out. James started to pull away, but Laura caught his hand. Stay. The word hung between them, weighted with more meaning than she intended. Emma didn't look up from the menu. Yeah, James. Stay. James's thumb brushed over Laura's knuckles. All right. As Emma flipped through channels and the city lights twinkled beyond the windows, Laura let herself exhale. The world as she knew it had ended today. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing. The storm before the calm. The penthouse suite hummed with the glow of the television, some forgettable rom-com playing at low volume while rain began to patter against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Emma had fallen asleep midway through the second movie, curled into the corner of the oversized sofa with a room service burger half-eaten on the coffee table. Laura tucked a blanket around her daughter's shoulders, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. In sleep, Emma looked younger, the fierce valedictorian replaced by the little girl who used to climb into her parents' bed during thunderstorms. James stood at the windows, his silhouette framed by the city lights below. He held a tumbler of whiskey, the ice nearly melted. Laura joined him, accepting the second glass he'd poured without being asked. "He'll come for her, you know," James said quietly, watching the rain streak down the glass. Laura didn't need to ask who he meant. The unread messages and missed calls from Daniel had stacked up on her silenced phone like bricks in a wall. "I know." The whiskey burned her throat, but the warmth that spread through her chest was welcome. She studied James's profile, the way the ambient light caught the silver at his temples, the tension in his jaw. "Why did you really come today?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. James turned, leaning back against the window. "I told you." "No," Laura interrupted softly. "Not to the ceremony."
To me.
"After everything Daniel did to you, you should hate me by association." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I could never hate you, Laura Mitchell." Her breath caught. James set his glass down with a quiet click. "That night Daniel fired me. You were the only one who looked me in the eye when I walked out. Everyone else pretended not to see." His thumb brushed a drop of condensation from his glass. "You mouthed, 'I'm sorry.'" Laura remembered. The memory was sharp. James standing in the foyer with his box of belongings, Daniel's triumphant smirk, the way her stomach had twisted with shame. "You saw that. I see everything about you." His voice dropped. "The way you bite your lip when you're nervous. How you always put everyone else first. That damn emerald dress you wore tonight because it matched Emma's eyes." Outside, lightning split the sky. The resulting thunder rattled the windows. Laura's pulse roared in her ears. "James." A knock at the suite door shattered the moment. They froze. Another knock, harder this time. Emma stirred on the couch as James moved toward the door. Laura caught his arm. "Don't." Through the peephole, James's shoulders tensed. "It's Daniel." Emma sat up, sleep vanishing instantly. "Dad." The doorknob rattled. "Laura, open this goddamn door." Daniel's voice, slurred with alcohol, carried through the heavy wood. James turned to Emma. "Take your mom into the bedroom."
No.
Laura stepped forward. "I'm done hiding." She opened the door. Daniel stood swaying in the hallway, his tie undone, hair disheveled. The scent of bourbon rolled off him in waves. His bloodshot eyes darted from Laura to James to Emma, his expression cycling through fury and desperation. "You," he spat at James. "You ruin everything." Emma stood, wrapping the blanket around herself like armor. "You did that yourself." Daniel's laugh was jagged. "My own daughter. My own wife." He focused on Laura, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Did you fuck him yet? Is that why you—" James moved like lightning, gripping Daniel's collar and shoving him back into the hallway. "That's enough." The altercation brought hotel security running. Two uniformed men rounded the corner as Daniel struggled against James's hold. "Sir, you need to leave," one guard said, stepping between them. Daniel wrenched free, pointing a shaking finger at Laura. "This isn't over. That house. The cars? The money?
Mine.
You'll get nothing." Laura stepped into the hallway, her bare feet cold against the marble floor. She didn't raise her voice. "You forget I know where all the bodies are buried, Daniel. And unlike you, I've kept receipts." The guards exchanged glances. "Ma'am, would you like us to escort him out?" "Yes," Emma said from the doorway. "Please." As security led Daniel away, his threats fading down the corridor, Laura realized her hands weren't shaking. Her breath came evenly. The world hadn't ended. James touched the small of her back. You okay? Laura turned to see Emma watching them, her expression unreadable. Yeah, Laura said, and found she meant it. I think I am. The storm still raged outside, but inside the suite, something fragile and hopeful had taken root. And for the first time in years, Laura didn't fear the coming dawn. The first morning, the scent of coffee woke Laura. For one disorienting moment, she didn't recognize the hotel suite's plush bedding or the unfamiliar weight of the comforter. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the curtains, painting golden stripes across the carpet. Then she remembered. The graduation. The confrontation. Daniel's drunken rage at their door. Laura sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair. The other side of the king bed was neatly made. Emma must have slept on the pull-out sofa to give her privacy. A note sat on the nightstand in her daughter's looping handwriting. Gone to get breakfast with James. Don't freak out. Love you. Laura huffed a laugh. Trust Emma to know exactly what she'd worry about. She padded to the bathroom, stopping short at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked exhausted, smudges under her eyes, yesterday's mascara faintly shadowing her cheeks. But there was something else, too. A rawness. A realness she hadn't seen in years. The shower's hot water scalded her skin, washing away the last remnants of the life she'd left behind. When she emerged, wrapped in one of the hotel's thick robes, she found the sitting area transformed. James stood at the small dining table, arranging containers from what smelled like an upscale diner. Emma was already digging into a stack of pancakes, her phone propped against a juice glass playing the morning news. Mitchell Capital under investigation following allegations of financial misconduct, the reporter said. A photo of Daniel flashed on screen, then one of Vanessa leaving a corporate building with a jacket over her head. Emma muted it. Morning, Mom. James looked up, his gaze catching Laura's. Something warm and unspoken passed between them before he gestured to the food. Wasn't sure what you'd want, so I got options. The spread was overwhelming, omelets, fresh fruit, pastries still warm from the oven. Laura's stomach growled. When was the last time someone had taken care of her like this? She took the seat across from Emma. You two have been busy. James poured her coffee, black with one sugar, just how she liked it. How had he known? Turns out when you threaten to expose corporate fraud, people move fast, he said dryly. The board called an emergency meeting at dawn. Emma shoved her phone across the table. An email from Daniel glared up at Laura. We need to talk. Alone. Laura set it aside without responding. What else did I miss? James hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his jacket. This was delivered to the front desk for you. Laura's name was scrawled across the front in Daniel's aggressive handwriting. Inside, a single key and a note. Take whatever you want from the house. Just stay away from my daughter. Emma snatched the paper, her face flushing with anger. He doesn't get to decide that. Laura took a steadying breath. The key felt heavy in her palm. Actually, he does. Legally, until the divorce is finalized. Which is why, James interrupted smoothly, I took the liberty of calling my attorney this morning. He's drafting emergency custody paperwork now. He nodded to Emma. Given your age and the circumstances, no judge will force you to see your father if you don't want to. Emma's eyes widened. Really? Really? James's phone buzzed. He checked it, then stood. Speaking of, I need to take this. Eat something, both of you. As he stepped onto the suite's balcony, Emma leaned forward.
Mom.
He stayed up all night making calls. For us. Laura watched through the glass as James ran a hand through his hair, his posture tense even from a distance. The morning light caught the silver at his temples, the strong line of his shoulders beneath the crisp dress shirt.
He didn't have to do that, she murmured.
Emma speared a strawberry.
Yeah, well.
Dad never would have. The truth of it settled between them. Laura thought of all the mornings Daniel had left before dawn for work, all the school events he'd missed, all the times he'd promised Emma something only to break it. James slid the balcony door open, his expression unreadable. Laura? A moment. Outside, the city stretched before them, alive with morning energy. James braced his hands on the railing. The board just suspended Daniel pending investigation, he said quietly. Vanessa's been arrested. Laura's knees weakened. She gripped the railing. What? Turns out embezzlement is a felony. James turned to face her. There's more. Daniel's frozen all your joint accounts. Of course he had. Laura's mind raced. The mortgage, Emma's college fund, the credit cards. I have some savings. James touched her wrist just briefly. I've already transferred retainers to the best divorce and custody attorneys in the city. This isn't my first corporate battle, Laura. I know how these men think. The morning sun warmed her face. Somewhere below, a street musician began playing a jazz standard. Life went on. Laura studied James, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his jaw tensed when he was holding back emotion. Why are you doing all this? He met her gaze without flinching. Because someone should have done it for you years ago. Inside, Emma turned up the volume on the TV. The reporter's voice carried through the glass. Scandal rocking Chicago's financial district this morning. Laura exhaled slowly. However terrifying, however uncertain, this was her life now. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, it felt like her own. The unraveling. The hotel phone rang just as Laura finished packing their few belongings into the sleek leather weekender James had somehow procured. Emma answered, her hello cautious before her expression shifted to disbelief. It's for you, she said, holding out the receiver. Dad's lawyer. Laura wiped suddenly damp palms on her jeans before taking the phone. Laura Mitchell. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Charles Whitmore of Whitmore and Associates. The voice was polished, expensive. I'm calling to discuss terms of your separation. Across the room, James set down Emma's suitcase and gave Laura a questioning look. She shook her head slightly. I wasn't aware we needed terms to separate from an adulterer who emptied our joint accounts, Laura said evenly. Whitmore cleared his throat. Mr. Mitchell is prepared to offer generous alimony in exchange for your discretion regarding recent events. Laura's grip tightened on the phone. How generous? A monthly stipend of $5,000. Continued use of the Elm Street property. Full tuition coverage for Emma's college. The numbers danced in Laura's head. Safety. Security. Everything she'd worried about losing. Then she caught Emma's eye, her daughter's face tight with suspicion. And in return? Laura asked. No contact with James Carter. No public statements about the embezzlement scandal. And, Whitmore paused delicately, Emma spends alternating weekends with her father. The suite seemed to tilt. Laura met James's gaze across the room. His dark eyes were unreadable. I'll need time to consider, she said. Whitmore's tone turned crisp. The offer expires at 5 p.m. today. My client advises this is your best and only option. The line went dead. Emma snatched the phone and slammed it down. What did he want? Laura repeated the terms, watching her daughter's face pale. He thinks he can buy me? Emma's voice cracked. Like some custody arrangement on a used car lot? James had gone very still by the window. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. It's a standard intimidation tactic. Make you feel cornered so you'll accept less than you deserve. Laura sank onto the sofa. It's more than I expected. Because Daniel's scared. James crouched before her, his hands braced on his knees. The board's investigation is just starting. If you testify about what you know. I don't know anything, Laura interrupted. You know Daniel. James held her gaze. You've seen how he operates for 20 years. That's enough to bury him. Emma sat beside Laura, gripping her hand. Mom, we can't go back. Not after everything. The suite's clock ticked loudly. 11:47 a.m. 5 hours until Daniel's deadline. Laura thought of all the years she'd spent smoothing over Daniel's absences, making excuses for his temper, shrinking herself to fit the space he allowed. She looked at Emma, her brilliant, brave girl who'd stood up to her father in front of hundreds. At James, who'd risked everything to do what was right. Her decision crystallized. Get your attorney on the phone, she told James. Then to Emma, pack your things. We're not taking Daniel's deal. James's phone was already out. What are we countering with? Laura stood, straightening her shoulders. Full custody of Emma. The house free and clear. Half his stake in Mitchell Capital. She smiled grimly. And I want Vanessa's office redecorated as my new executive suite when I take her seat on the board. Emma's gasp turned into a laugh. James's eyes gleamed with something like pride as he dialed. You realize he'll fight this, he murmured. Laura picked up the hotel phone and dialed room service. Let him. She ordered a bottle of champagne, the most expensive on the menu, before adding, We're celebrating. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, Laura watched James pace the balcony, his voice sharp and confident as he outlined their terms to the attorney. Emma hummed as she packed, occasionally shooting Laura secret, hopeful smiles. The fear that had gripped Laura's chest for years, the constant worry of not being enough, of losing everything, had vanished. In its place was something fierce and unshakable. Daniel had underestimated her for the last time. When the champagne arrived, Laura popped the cork herself. The sound was loud and bright, like a starting pistol.
Game on.
The beginning. 1 year later, Laura stood in the corner office of Mitchell Capital, now renamed Carter and Mitchell Financial Group. The view from the 42nd floor stretched across Lake Michigan, the water sparkling under the June sun, just as it had on Emma's graduation day. Her office still smelled faintly of fresh paint. The plaque on the door read Laura Mitchell, Chief Operating Officer, in bold lettering. Vanessa's old space had been completely gutted, down to the studs, just as Laura had demanded. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. James leaned against the frame, holding 2 coffee cups. You ready? Laura smoothed her blazer. Emerald green, like the dress she'd worn that fateful day. More than ready. The boardroom buzzed with conversation as they entered. The same men who had once dismissed Laura at company parties now stood when she walked in. At the head of the table, Emma sat flipping through a presentation folder, her college lanyard draped around her neck. James cleared his throat. Let's begin. As the quarterly report circulated, Laura allowed herself a moment to reflect. The past year had been a whirlwind. The bitter divorce battle, Daniel's eventual plea deal to avoid jail time, the corporate restructuring that had left her and James as majority shareholders. Through it all, Emma had flourished at Northwestern, while Laura discovered a knack for finance she never knew she had. Which brings us to our final item, James said, pulling Laura from her thoughts. He tapped a key, and the screen displayed a breaking news alert. Former finance exec Daniel Mitchell announces relocation to Dubai. A few board members chuckled. Laura met Emma's gaze across the table. No pain there, just quiet acceptance. When the meeting adjourned, James caught Laura's elbow. Walk with me. They took the private elevator down to the lobby, then out into the summer warmth. The streets were alive with lunchtime crowds, the energy of the city pulsing around them. James stopped at a small park overlooking the water. I have something for you. He pulled an envelope from his inside pocket. Laura recognized the stationery immediately, thick ivory stock with the Lincoln Park High School crest. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a program from this year's graduation ceremony. A sticky note marked one page. Guest speaker. Emma Mitchell, class of 23. She asked me not to tell you, James said softly. She wanted it to be a surprise. Laura's vision blurred. Last year's ceremony felt like a lifetime ago. The betrayal, the humiliation, the terrifying uncertainty of what came next. Now here they were, stronger, happier. James brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. You did that, Laura. You gave her the courage to stand up and the safety to land when she fell. She leaned into his touch. We did it together. The breeze off the lake carried the scent of blooming flowers. Somewhere nearby, a street musician played a jazz standard, the same one Laura had heard that morning after Daniel's drunken confrontation at the hotel. Funny how life circled back. James's phone buzzed. He checked it and smiled. Emma wants to know if we're still on for dinner. Laura laced her fingers through his. Tell her we wouldn't miss it. As they walked back toward the gleaming tower that bore both their names, Laura realized this wasn't an ending. It wasn't even a victory. It was simply the beginning of whatever came next. Did Laura's journey inspire you? Share your thoughts in the comments. When was the moment you found your strength? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience. And stay tuned for next week's premiere. The doctor told me I'd never walk again, so I ran a marathon.